multiple resource concerns, soil erosion, livestock management, stream erosion. We do a lot of agronomic practices too, fertility. So there's a wide range of forestry work. We do a lot of forestry. So we basically cover about every land use there is. But primarily we work with farmers in the county with different farm programs.
My name's Terry Horn. I'm an engineer that works for USDA. I've got to know the folks in the city of Aaron and Houston County by dealing with a lot of your flooding issues. So after every great big storm, we work with local unit of government, in this case, city of Aaron, and they show us projects, and depending on what they are, the USDA is able to help with those as far as flood recovery, following a great big event whenever you have one. I'm the engineer that normally does the design work on those. The program is called our Emergency Watershed Protection Program. We have used several projects here in the city of Aaron and in Houston County surrounding it, working with all kinds of the county highway department. I'm the engineer that's responsible for that. I work statewide. I work through Wayne, but I do work statewide as requested. And we're here today at the request of Mayor Bailey to try to answer any questions you all might have.
My name is Jacob Britton. I'm the soil conservation technician for Dumfries, Houston County. I work under Wayne. He's my direct supervisor, and I assist him with the farm program in the two counties.
All right, thank you. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So one of the first questions I would have, because it's been asked of me, so one of my first questions is, apparently in the 70s, there was a gentleman named Mr. Brown who would borrow Carol Law's bulldozer and run it through the creeks and build up berms and stuff. And I've been asked why we don't do that anymore. So I'd like for y'all to expand on that.
All right, so the other part of my job is, since everything I do seems to be in the middle of a stream, one way or the other, I've had to learn what the permitting regulations are statewide, dealing with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, State Department of Environment and Conservation, and in your all's part of the world, TVA as well. So as part of that, the Corps of Engineers has the 1972 Clean Water Act. So at some point in there, predating that, and probably a little while for them to get their feet under them, they had not regulated that, so people could do a whole lot more of what you're talking about. The state TDEC office has the 1977 State Water Quality Control Act that governs those things as well. So as part of that, predating that, before you ever had to ask for permission, people did exactly what you said. They would put a bulldozer in or a track on each side, and they would dredge gravel, and they'd build up bars and build up maybe a berm on one side or the other or both, and try to make homemade levees out of it. So, and then after they had ever so many years, they'd go down through there. After you have another big storm and things change, they would do it again. So now the state and the feds have authority over that. By the way, I don't know if anybody made that clear. We are not regulatory. We have no say in permits whatsoever. So we have to get permits the same as you all would if you do something in a creek. But that's not us saying yay or nay either way. The state and the Corps will tell you their laws are required to get permits if you're going to change the physical, chemical, or biological characteristics of a stream. If you're taking the gravel bar out of a stream and pushing it up and making a levee or something like that, or if you're just dredging the stream and hauling it off, you're changing the stream channel bottom and oftentimes the stream banks themselves, and all of that requires permits. And the state and the Corps, according to all the meetings I've been in with them, will tell you that that is a negative to the stream, because you're affecting those critters that live there. You're affecting the water quality of keep in mind, all that's drinking water. So all that water goes down through there, and where a trackhoe runs or a dozer runs up the middle of the creek, all that material will change the amount of turbidity that goes into your water, that where it has to be treated before it comes back out to the people that use it. But all of that requires permits. And if it's a negative impact, and almost all of that would be considered a negative impact from the state or the court. Again, I don't want to speak for them. I'll just tell you what I've had told me, and the same thing from the same folks. At that point, if it's really a negative impact, they'll tell you it requires mitigation, because they're saying you're making negative impacts to the stream, and it's a pretty big penalty. The last I heard, we were just talking about this on the way up here for a different type project. It's a little over $2,000 per linear foot. The last time I heard a number, and that's serious money, y'all. I mean, No individual I know, or even municipalities want to pay $2,000 a foot times, what we were talking about, 5 miles? 5 miles would be 25,000 feet, 25,000 times 2,000, that's an enormous amount of money. So anyway, and that would be before you actually did the work. TDEC would want to see the negative, the payment for the negative impact, and then that is to be used in other parts to help offset the impacts from those actions. Did that cover that at all, Mr. Webb?
Think so.
Okay. Anything beyond that on the gravel dredging thing?
I mean, we can't go in, there's.
So you can, if you're willing to do that, you get a permit and you ask for it. TDEX has got a general permit that's automatically approved, but it's for little bitty areas. It's not from one end of town to the other end of town, that type of deal.
On the upper end of town up here, they cleaned out what they done, they cleaned out the bridge going on the main road, back off the island, this side of it,
So-
Right up the tree.
So let me tell you this about the bridges. There is a state and federal permits if you're working, that's for protecting infrastructure like a bridge or a road or something like that. You're allowed to work for the state's rules. I think it's now don't quote me on this. They change them every 5 years, but I think it's 100 foot upstream of a bridge to the bridge and then 100 foot downstream of the bridge. And that allows you to do armoring of the bank if it's eroded, or it allows you to remove trees out, or it'll also allow you to remove the gravel and sediment out. So if you're talking about small areas like that, there are permits. The problem comes when you start saying, I'm going to go do from one end of town to the other. That's a struggle.
Well, I think where he's referring to, it's probably 1,000 feet from, well, no, it wouldn't be that far, but it would be further than the,
100 up and 100 down.
yeah, because it's in the middle of a section where it's just kind of, it's right up here, kind of in front of the barber shop.
When it went around that island, what it's done up there is you can walk right to the edge of the pavement, it's washed the road, right to the creek.
So now I don't know that site specific. I've worked a lot in Girlstown, but I don't know exactly where the island's at. When you're talking about an island, when you've got a single thread string where it's coming down through and there ain't no islands, it's just a single one channel. When you get to a place and then you have an island, at that point it splits the flow, and normally that slows it down and it loses the power in the stream. And normally what happens is the gravel and stuff starts growing in the middle and it causes erosion in one side or the other, or sometimes both, depending on what's going on. So I don't know your site.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened. The island.
Every now and then I get one right. Oh,
Yeah, oh, yeah, you're right.
You're
The island that's there wasn't there 6 or 7 years ago. So it's been very,
so here's the other part that, and I don't know what caused it. I don't know if that's downstream of a bridge support. So if you have a bridge support and the bridge is in the middle, that creates a current break, and then stuff starts hanging down there at some point. And then at that point, if you get 1 or 2 trees lodged there, then it just starts growing. Depending on how big and how long that is, you might get permission to do that. I will tell you this, for an individual landowner, I'm not talking about cities, but an individual landowner can get a TDEC permit for $50. Now that sounds, it's a lot, but that ain't nothing compared to what you're talking about paying if you're talking about hiring equipment operators and things like that. So for $50, you could, but now if they're going to tell you no, then I wouldn't even follow through. But TDEC's job, any of the regulatory agency's job, is to answer questions of an individual landowner. If you took them out there and said, I've got this island and I want to remove it, or I want to remove the trees off of it, or whatever you want to do, they would have to answer that question and say, we think we can give you a general permit for this, or an individual permit. The individual permits comes with a lot more restrictions, and that's where the mitigation often kicks in. So there's, depending on how small and how long that island is, and I don't know. But if it's pretty short in length, then oftentimes you can do something. If you start talking about something that's got a lot of length to it, that's when they start telling you you're beyond the word they use, de minimis, meaning it's very minimal impacts to the stream. The longer you get, the more impact of the stream it is, the more they're going to run you through the ringer. It's going to be hard to get the permit.
Where you got it out, the better it would be less.
So let me tell you one more thing to you about an island. A stream is going to more or less maintain the same bottom width. So if it's upstream of that or downstream of that, let's say it's normally 20 foot wide at the bottom. If you take all that island out and now it's 50, that bar is coming back. It won't probably be in the exact same place. Normally it would tie into one side or the other, but it's coming back. Gravel dredging in general, when you take a string channel that looks like this, and then we do this, what you just did, let's say you went from 20 feet to 40 feet wide. You just took the velocity of the water. When you double your width, you cut your velocity in half. When you cut your velocity in half, you created the place in that creek where all of your gravel wants to come, because that creek is going to start necking itself right back down to that same width. You just can't do this. It sounds nice and neat that well, if we make it double the width, we can get more water through there. Short term, until the next big flood, you can. Short term, you can. But as soon as that gravel, on one side or the other, gravel bar starts forming again, and then here you come back. If you ask whoever did that gravel dredging with the bulldozer in the 70s, if you ask them what that channel looked like before, and then ask them how long it took for it to get back, it's doing the same thing. Hydraulics haven't changed. The power of that stream is the same now as it was 50 years ago in the 70s.
Well, one thing I'd like to add to that is we have to talk to TDOT, because TDOT is aware, because it's their right of way. But they've told us they're not gonna touch the island. They're waiting till it gets worse, and then they're gonna do something.
When it gets bad enough to affect them.
Right.
I mean, that's
It's already effective. That's like he said, it's getting close to the road, but they're waiting. Well, there must be a reason they don't want to touch it, would be my thoughts, or.
Well, TDOT only has a right of way for a certain distance from the center line of the road on any state highway that they've got. No different than the county only has a certain, or city only has a certain right of way from the center line of the road in both directions. Most of the time, I don't see any municipality or TDOT or anybody like that. They're not going to get out until it becomes dangerous. They don't touch it. They wait till it gets right there to the edge of the road where they've got to deal with it, and then they will. Well, so maybe they are to the point where they're ready to do that. And I don't want to speak for them, but so I will say this for, keep in mind, I said we worked in city area in several places doing the same thing. Not for state roads. I ain't allowed to work on those because TDOT's got to do them. But on a city road or a county road, when the creek erodes and gets right next to the road, that's the kind of place that Mayor Bailey or the county highway department, people like that ask for our assistance, and we are able to help in those types of situations. But now it's got to be so darn close and scary. We're not allowed to say it's over at 10 or 15 feet. I see it coming. I can't do nothing about it while I see it coming. I've got to wait till the road's here and it's just so darn close that people drive by and it scares them looking off of it.
Well, I would like to take this time to say these gentlemen have been very helpful to the city of Erin. They have done exactly that on Denmark Road, McMillan Street, Tank Hill, Salmon Branch. I'm probably overlooking some places.
No, that's pretty good right there.
Overhead bridge, underneath overhead.
Yeah, underneath overhead bridge. So they have done several places for us, but they have their protocol on how close it can
It's gotta
get
be
to the
close.
utilities and things like that.
Ours is considered an emergency program. Emergency means that. It means that you look off there and it's scary and you know something bad's about to happen. I can't say, in no case are we allowed to, and TDOT ain't gonna do it either. They're not gonna say, I see it coming and I know I'm gonna have to deal with it. It's like, oh no, I've got to deal with it right now.
Every meeting I've been in, I think y'all been very helpful, give us a lot of good information.
Listen, and we'll be back as long as if the mayor and the county highway department want us to keep coming back and helping them. We'll be back. This is a program that's tied to storm events. So unfortunately, when you get one of them things, and we know we're gonna get another one, the question's when, then we're able to, if they request the assistance, we're allowed to do that.
The creeks are half owned by the landowners. Part of the city of Erin is not supposed to work on private property. This is a city problem. It looks like to me there would be some kind of way that, seeing that this is a city problem, it's flooding, that we could get in there and do some help.
Angie mentioned that a little bit as a topic that she kind of wanted me to hit on a little bit, knowing what's going on. So if you do flood control, let's say you get all the permits and you can jump through all those hoops and actually get them. Whatever that turns out to be, let's say you're going to work on that stream channel from up the upper part all the way down below the downtown area. Each individual landowner is going to have to be able to give whoever's doing the work permission, give them certified land rights that they can at least temporary construction where they can come out there, do the work, and then get done, and then get out of there and go. At that point, probably haul the extra material off somewhere. So I know everybody always goes, every landowner will agree with it. Sometimes. There's always one somewhere that, let's say, let's say if you're widening the channel, for example. If you've got 5,000, we said 5 miles, 25,000 feet. So let's say we got 25,000 feet, but if we've got one place or a couple of places there in the middle where one landowner says, I don't want you to touch my property, you just lost the effectiveness of the whole thing. The only way you're effective is if you get whatever the channel you're wanting to look like would go the same way all the way through town and get downstream of it and somehow turn it loose. If you've got a landowner that says, I don't want you on my property, unless you're gonna go through eminent domain or something like that, that's a whole nother headache. You always run into somebody that there's a headache there and they just say, I don't want anybody, especially like this. Let's say it's the federal government helping you. They don't want the federal government on their property. I understand that thought, but it's a limitation. So, it's a hard deal to overcome. To get everybody pulling, in the same direction is no piece of cake.
You know, I know that there's a lot of things we can't do, and I'm not willing to say, let's just not do nothing.
I agree.
Let's start one place and go to another.
Well, so Wayne mentioned to me, and I don't know which person in this group brought it up. Every little bit helps. So, I mean, if you're looking for a magic bullet to do it all at once, that's kind of hard to come by. He mentioned to me, and I don't know who it was, they talked about having a piece of property, I'm picturing a lot somewhere along the stream in downtown area, and the city owning that, I'm assuming that, I don't know about that, but I'm assuming the city would be owning that. And they wanted to go in there and take that lot and excavate the material down and allow the stream to back up into that when it floods. So I have seen that, so it depends on how big it is, to how much difference you make and how deep you excavate. Every little bit makes a difference. Would 1/2 acre lot, a couple of feet deep, make a difference? It'd make about that much difference. It'd be so small you couldn't measure it. But now I have seen other towns do the same thing. So every time that a place is already flood prone, if a place comes up for sale, or if they found a way for others to put certain easements on the place and help buy properties out and then remove some of that material to help haul it off, I've seen that done. If it's small, it'll fill up in seconds with water. As much water comes down that holler down through the middle of town. But if you ask me if it make a difference, it'll make a little bit of difference.
I make that recommendation.
Ma'am?
I make that recommendation.
Well, it's not a bad one.
It's a property that the city already owns, and in
Okay.
this upcoming year's budget, we're buying a new dump truck and we have equipment and what have you. And, we had the wherewithal to do it amongst ourselves, don't have to get approval from a property owner because the city of Huron owns it. Now, with the depth of the soil to be removed, would that not make it
It'll
a
help.
little
So
bit
the
more?
deeper you can go, the better you are.
And
And I don't always know, I will tell you this, I looked with Mayor Bailey last time we did something like this, and I can't remember exactly where he took me to, but on the upstream end of town and the kind of the downstream end of town, both places, the channel was on bedrock. So unless, most folks aren't gonna go in there and say, I'm gonna start excavating below the bedrock. So at that point, depending on where the bedrock layers are, you could go down that far. And at that point, so every dump truck load you haul off is a dump truck load of water that can back up into there and help slow things down.
Yes, sir, and that water comes down the creek at Midway and right through there, and it's very, very forceful.
Oh, no doubt.
And at least that would capture some of the
It
water
will.
in the reservoir and lessen the force and
A
the
little bit.
rapidity,
A little bit.
with which it flows. Because what it does is it comes right on down to the city of Huron and it floods the Baptist church and those little old businesses that are sitting right on the road. So we've got the wherewithal to do that, and we don't need permission.
Making sure, now keep in mind, I've not seen that piece of land.
Yes.
As long as it's not a wetland, and I doubt it is down there, and at that point, it's not part of the stream, it's off of the stream,
Yes.
I would think you're not required to get permits for that.
No.
I will say this, of course, like what we was talking about, every little bit helps. That's the most expensive way to do flood control. Flood control, when you literally, for every place that I want a gallon of water to fill in a hole, if I've got to take every bit of that, put that into the back of a truck and haul off somewhere, you got to do something with it. That's an expensive way to do flood control. Doesn't mean it can't be done if you do enough of it. The best way to do flood control, and this is hard. I mean, there's nothing easy about it. I didn't go into this to start with, but it's every small town that I see across the state that's got problems with flooding. Why is the town where it's at? Because we had good water there. When they settled the area, they moved in here and it was good water. And I mean, you didn't ever, back in those days, you didn't get too far from good water. Well, that's both a blessing and curse for us now. Sometimes we're a little too close to good water now. And we didn't used to have had all these buildings pretty close to it. And now we're getting impacts from it. And we're getting bigger storms now than what we used to, for whatever reason. And so that causes some of those impacts. But so as far as getting water, trying to flood control, I would encourage you all to do everything you can. It's kind of an all of the above type answer. If you wanted to, so one way is to store water above town. Now, the other thing is too, everybody's already lived here for a long time. Most places ain't, there's a lot of folks there's not a lot of room available where you can build small pond dams like stormwater detention that will store water from a big storm and slowly let it go. So if you can get up there and you do and one little pond, just like what I was talking about on your one lot, one little pond make about that much difference. You've got to do a bunch of it if you're going to do that type of thing. Do you even have places to do that? Or are there landowners willing? Because all this is going to be private land. Because you're going to be on somebody's property to go in there and try to do these things. So would you be able to store some water up there? Also, there are government agencies and others that will help with buyouts. Places that flood all the time, some of those places are in a tough spot. I would encourage those folks not to fight it as much and be thinking about trying to get to higher ground. And if that means that there is a easement program that'll help offset some of that, take advantage of it where it's available. Just at least pursue see what's out there. TVA has done some of that in some areas. You're in Tennessee Valley watershed. I don't know who else. Who else helped in Waverly? Do you remember?
The only ones.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
actually, you did a FEMA buyout, where I
FEMA. My brain just locked up. Sorry.
Well, we have had several projects, land acquisitions and FEMA
Yeah.
projects, and we currently are in the process of doing. It's a smaller project than there's a trailer in another building over here, and it's Road Bridge,
Okay.
which seems to be a large problem area for us anyway. And then just Front Street, just a bit, some other property there that connects to Rocky Hollow.
Okay.
That's where that is. And so we're doing the buyout, and we will tear down all those structures and haul that off. And so then, in essence, that will give the water some.
It does. That's right. Because those areas that are sitting low now, if there's no infrastructure on, if water, just like what you're talking about in your place that you're talking about, if water gets in there, what does it hurt? If there's nothing there, if there's not a house or a business or even a bridge or a section of road or something like that, public infrastructure, if there's nothing in there, it doesn't hurt for water to get over it. And when the water goes back down, it drains off and leaves. So FEMA is a good option. I don't want enough to be dangerous when it comes to FEMA. If you all, I know that they exist. I know they do these types of things following big storms. But if you're already taking advantage of it, then you all know that process. So I'm jumping around all over the place. Sorry about that.
Well, another question I have is one thing I've noticed, and of course, we're down in a valley. We have water coming from everywhere, off Tank Hill, off Spring Street. Sure. We have 3 tributaries that come into the main creek going through town, and plus we have 2 other, I guess they're dry unless the storms come,
Yeah.
like off Spring Street and off Metcalf. But one thing I've noticed is we have all this stuff coming into it, but when you get down here, the creek's not any bigger than it is way upstream. I mean, but you've got more coming into it. In fact, it seems to be more shallow back here. That's why we have.
All right, so
low water
shallow is a
pressure.
different thing. At that point, your shallow is controlled by what me and you went and looked at when we looked at it before. Bedrock down on the downstream end, bedrock up. You're not going down. You're in the middle. Now, we didn't stop everywhere, every 50 foot and look, see if there's bedrock all the way through there. I know there's places where there's a little bit of gravel here and there, and then there's other places of bedrock. Unless you're going to go in and somehow literally drill and shoot rock in that channel, your depth is being controlled by the natural bedrock of that whole area. And at that point, if you've got bedrock down here and bedrock right here, let's say you had a big deep hole in gravel right here, going in and excavating 10-foot deep gravel right here doesn't really do anything, because water at that point levels itself right across it, and slowly over, maybe not even slowly, depending on how big storm you had, it turns right around and it fills that right back up. So the depth is controlled by the geology of the area. What you might see in some places, if the water can't go down, sometimes it'll get a little wider, but maybe not. So
The stream does not seem to be any wider when we've looked at it. And which my other thing would be, if you're digging reservoirs, what about your water table? Does that affect it?
So it depends, and it can. If you're in a place like where she was talking about, like a lot over next to the, off the edge of a stream channel somewhere. So if your water table, whatever it is, I'm not talking about the creek itself, I'm talking about water table of the land on either side of it. If you dig a hole, and all I'm saying is basically take that lot and go down.
Slope it.
Whatever down to the depth, whatever it is. So if you do that, that acts like a sump. So water table at that point is going to go to the lowest point. So if you've got a lot here and water is out here, water will get to that, and it will go deeper and drop that water table some. Now it also, when y'all have a flood, it does raise it back up, because that's part of the deal too. But during the summertime months, when your water is normally at your lowest, then that water table will drop some. Now, is that significant? It's more significant right where the banks are. As you get back further away from the bank, it rises up kind of slowly back up to whatever's normal. If you get more than 50 to 75 feet in either direction, it'll be back up to normal. But now right there on that, the lots next to it, it'll make a difference. Does that make sense at all? If you're digging reservoirs in the headwaters, if you're going to basically build you a dam and try to store water before it gets to it, it depends on if you design that as a dry dam. If you do it as a dry dam, of which no landowner normally ever wants, they always want the actual water themselves. If you do it as a dry dam, a structure that will drain itself all the way back down when it has rain, that gives you the maximum amount of storage. But it's kind of just an open, ugly pit out there for if a landowner owns it. I mean, you really have to sell somebody into making a difference for the town when you're doing that. So,
Well, but at the same time, if it does dry, it's less chance for mosquitoes and stuff, correct?
all true, as long as it's done right, that the pool area can get to the pipe and leave. If you leave a low spot in there, so if your pipe is sticking here, and then you've got a pond out here, to the bottom of the pond is a foot or so low, water can't get out at that point, and at that point, it is a mosquito pit.
Is there any way the landowners, do they have to build reservoirs themselves, or could be some help from the government?
You're asking the wrong person on that. Landowners can build a pond on their own. They sure can. If you're on a watershed type basis, meaning that the whole group of everybody in town is working towards the same goal, I would defer to what tax dollars get paid for at that point. I don't know. That would have to be a group effort that would go through your city council and all that good stuff. So, and I'm certainly not. I don't have, other than the fact that I know it has to go through some of those processes, I do not know what those processes are.
Well, what I meant was any federal grants or anything like that, you know?
So,
I mean, the whole city got no money.
we don't normally do much federal cost share on flood control. While we do a bunch of work on farmland and stuff like that, if that's what we're talking about, although I don't know how much we're talking about farmland and how much we're talking about residential lots. If you start talking about, depending on where you're talking about, residential lots, that means it's going to be pretty small and there's not much room. That's kind of a problem too, because of where we've been living for a long time. When you get into more agricultural areas, I would defer to you and ask you a little bit about pond. Do you all do very many ponds anymore?
No, not for flood control. I know that come up, of course, the flooding in Waverly and what happened there, control. But there's a whole gamut process that you have to go through. There's actually 3 structures in Humphreys County that control water. It's around the city of McEwen.
Yeah.
But there has to be a whole watershed study done. Those are done prior before me coming.
The last one was built in 2001.
So So I do know there, like for Trace Creek itself, there's a floodplain study being done right now, and there's several different agencies that are taking part of that, but I believe doesn't have to be where it's, catastrophic.
So, yeah, normally they have to tie it to a reason like that. Most of the time, it's after you have some big event like we're talking about, Waverly, a bunch of people got killed and that type of thing. So, I will say this. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has the ability, depending on funding, to try to do a flood study, if you all request it. I do not know what the cost share rate or any of that thing is. I do know that they have a whole team of folks that does the flood study, that will look at the various, what's going on, where your problems are, and then they can come up with a whole bunch of alternatives that will help. That may not be the ones you want, but it's basically, they'll look at buyouts. They'll look at, like what they're doing in Waverly, some of those buildings, they're raising up their foundation to where they're above a certain flood line. They can look at dams if they've got places. I know they've looked at levees in some places. And then sometimes it's a combination of all those things as part of that. Our agency also has a flood control program that's working with those folks in Waverly. That sometimes us in the Corps of Engineers, and we are on that one, we're helping work our way through that process. And I've got a program manager that works on the same staff as I do, that if you guys want to pursue that, he even asked me today if this needed to be, and I told him, I said, I don't really think that's what this is going to do, maybe exactly where we end up. So, sorry.
Or either one of them, but, you know, I think the legislature just approved Houston, Stewart, and Humphrey to be put in the West Tennessee Basin. Is that going to ease the restriction? Was that?
So West Tennessee.
That's going, I mean, we were approved to go in the West Tennessee Basin.
So I've worked with those guys over the years. Mostly, now obviously your counties have been added in. Most of it was from Kentucky Lake to the Mississippi Rivers, where I've worked with them before. I don't want to speak out of turn for what they do. I've seen them on a bunch of the big stream channels in West Tennessee. They go through and they remove the woody debris that's in the channel, remove that, and do whatever they do with it to make sure it don't get back in the creek and clog it up. And they call that maintenance, that they go through it. That's like on a regular schedule. However many years they'll go through up that stream wherever they're supposed to go, and they remove the woody debris. I've never known them to dredge channels and remove gravel, but I could be wrong on that.
You know, Mr. Blackwood?
He runs the shop.
Yeah, he's actually who I talked to. He is supposed to be coming over here in a couple of weeks.
David Blackwood ought to be able, he's the, I guess the title's director. So, David, and his predecessor is Gary Ayers. I said Gary, but it's David. He's the head of TDEC, working for the governor. He's a political man. So, he was over that shop for a long. I would think either one of those guys would be able to explain what they can do and what they can't do.
I think if you remove the debris out of the creek, I think the gravel, it'll wash a lot of the gravel stuff out of it anyway, if the trees and stuff are not in there.
Sometimes, depending on what you got going on, sometimes. Sir.
This is a question that Chris was talking about.
Yes.
And gravel removal. Here at church property, there's a 30-inch or 36-inch culvert. The origin of that is on Main Street on the state highway, with an input to that culvert. It runs south toward the creek bed, and then there's a 90-degree turn in a ditch. And of course, when the water comes down, it turns, it deposits gravel there.
Yes.
Right now, that culvert is about 1/3 to almost a half stopped up at the end with gravel, and then the ditch itself has filled in 2 or 3 feet higher than it was 5 years ago. And then it's a very short, it's 100 feet or less. It's not much distance at all. Where it goes into another culvert that goes diagonally under the city street to the stream. So it's not anything affecting the stream, but it's stopping up that first drainage.
So there's never been a culvert or a bridge, including a box culvert or anything else, that doesn't have problems like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We want them because Drop through water.
My question, to get that gravel out of there, would that require a permit, or is there funding that might be able to help with it?
I don't know about funding being able to help. I would think they would call that a maintenance thing, because like I just said on culverts, unfortunately, every culvert's gonna, especially when you talk about a 90-degree bend, every time a stream or a channel has to make a 90-degree bend, it has to slow down. Water has to make that 90-degree bend. When it slows down, gravel drops out because it just slowed way down. And culverts often do what you said as a bottom part of it, and sometimes they just get completely buried where there's no water going through them. If it's a stream, meaning if it's really a stream that TDEC regulates, then I would say a permit is required. But now TDEC has those things, the general permits, some of them say they have to be, you have to notify them, it's what's it called? Notification of intent, NOI, meaning you're saying, I'm going to do X, whatever that is. Some of them require you to notify them. Others will let you do it without notifying them. Now, if it's not a stream,
That culvert belongs to the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, wouldn't it not be responsible?
TDOT's supposed to be, if it's TDOT's, if it's under a state highway, then it's TDOT's
Well,
responsibility.
the debris that's coming, that's filling it up, is coming from the street.
Okay.
It catches all the debris from the street, goes into a catch basin there, then goes, just like Dr. Martin said, over to the creek, and it's filling up. And
Unfortunately, that's a common thing. If you're looking at any ground pipe culvert, unless it's just enormous, like 8 or 10 feet or something in diameter, y'all talking about 2 or 3 foot culvert or something like that. So if it's like that, it don't take much of a twig or a limb to get across that, and it plugs everything up. And nobody will spend, every time it's raining or coming a big storm, nobody's out there waiting to see when the next limb's gonna catch across it. And all it takes is one limb across the face of it, and then you just took a culvert that was flowing good, and then basically it's almost down to something like this with limbs across the middle, and at that point your gravel's gonna start stacking up behind it and fill up the stream channel.
So would it be reasonable to talk to TDOT about their culvert that stopped up and flooded our property?
If I was trying to have something done on anything dealing with state highway, TDOT's who you need to talk to, whoever, whatever that may be. They may still look at you and tell you they'll take care of it when it happens, but oftentimes when they've got a lot of irons in the fire, folks, sometimes other things get pushed to the side. I'm not saying they won't do it, but that's life. You got 1,000 places to go after every flood, so but they do the maintenance. But yes, Todd, you got your contract on that, and I don't know who. I'm sure you guys have got a contact with TDOT that works your all's region that you all could point towards.
Yeah, they just came recently and looked at that spot where the islands have.
And then is that what you said yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What else have you folks today? I will discourage a couple of different things that I see, not just here in Houston County. Any place west of Nashville that's got gravel in the creeks, this is their issue. They all want to take the gravel out of the creeks and then they want to make a levee out of it. So being an engineer, looking at levees are only as good as the material you make them out of. That means it to be compacted clay material. Gravel and sand, terrible. If you just take the material you get out of the creek, and most of that it's pretty good sized gravel, and then it goes down to some sand mixed in it, that has 0 clay in it. So even if you set it over here to the side and try to make a levee out of it, the next time the water gets out, it's going to bust it somewhere. You never know where, but somewhere. And also, I've worked in and around New Orleans a little bit at one time. You see what they've done down through there trying to build everything out of levees? There's never been a levee that's too big that at some point there's going to be a storm get big enough to overtop it. And then once it overtops, it's catastrophic flooding at that point. It cuts the levee in two, makes a great big hole, and then water goes as far as the water can go. Levees have their place, but goodness, they're a risk. They're a false sense of security to me. And a levee, a homemade levee that's built out of sand and gravel, is really a false sense of security. I would discourage you all from trying that. I would highly discourage that.
You know, I think, was it last year y'all were down here?
Man, I don't remember. Maybe.
Maybe last year, maybe.
sometime fairly recent.
No, I think it's actually Wayne said, you know, it all starts, if we're trying to clean up here and get water out, we gotta start at the river part back. Well,
Okay, so depending on what you're talking about, as far as the channel itself, that's right. If you take a channel through Aaron, let's just say Aaron, if you're going deeper, now, we already talked about bedrock and having the problems there, but if you go deeper, and then all of a sudden you hop way up, all that's gonna form fill back in. If you're doing flood control anywhere, you start down here and bring your channel and try to maintain your grade to wherever you're going to.
well, I'm on the far end of all this water, but.
The downstream end?
Yeah, so
Okay.
if you're building levees and ponds up here, something happens, it comes out, it's gonna eventually.
So that's an impact on you. That's exactly, so if, let's say we've got a stream like this that's got a floodplain out here now that it's getting across. If we put levees on both sides and we basically stack that water up deeper and deeper and deeper through there, at some point down here, somebody down there is going to catch all that water. It's funneled to somewhere, your place or somebody else's. So yes, there are impacts with it. I am not advocating saying there's no impacts to any of this. When you do a flood study, like what I was talking about with the Corps of Engineers, they evaluate those things that we're talking about.
Well, from the river up till you get to the city limits is all farmland. So, I mean, we all be in the farm side of agriculture. I mean, is there some way we could get some assistance to help farmers out clean up creeks? Because most of the time
We don't do, so we don't have a practice that does gravel dredging in streams, period.
As far as trees out in the creek,
We have got a practice, if it's severe enough, it's called clearing and snagging. That's what we call it, but it's still getting trees and any other kind of junk, old cars, any kind of junk that gets loose in the creek. There is some of that. It has to be that individual landowner that has to have the help. And then they can, whenever they sign up for our programs through Wayne, at that point, they would look at that and try to determine how much it is. And then and you want to explain that the rest of the way?
Yeah, so we look at it as a soil erosion issue. So we've done numerous projects with stream bank stabilization. So a lot of times too, if let's say there's a big old log that's really impacting our site, we can't work around it. Sometimes we can pull that out to put our bank stabilization in. So the programs we have is to protect agricultural land. So let's say if it's a cornfield, bean field that's severely eroding, we can go in there and do stabilization, put rock work on it. If it's a pasture field, we can do that. If it's agriculture tied to, the field is agriculture, then we want to go in there and protect that agricultural land. Now it's not a gimme program. It's you pay some, we pay some, and we have to go through all the proper permits with all the environmental people, just like what Terry was talking, the Army Corps of Engineers and Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation. So they regulate every practice that we do.
And it's competitive if they were applying.
It's competitive, and we've had people, sign up, get pre-approved, and they say, well, we'd love to do this, but we can't afford our portion of it, and then they cancel it. Or we've had some say, hey, yeah, that sounds like a great deal, let's do it. So, but it's strictly voluntary, and it's competitive, and typically the funding usually comes out in the spring, so we're having to do an application process a year before. But we've had numerous people sign up and do a lot of stream bank stabilization.
So let me take what you're talking about just a step further. What Angie was talking about earlier about in town, about if you have to work an area kind of from start to finish. If you've only got one spot, let's say it's on your place. Let's say we got one place out there, we've got a bunch of woody debris down and you wanted to provide help. Let's say you could apply for it and got assistance. If that was the only problem you got, then that's great. But if it's scattered all up and down on your neighbors upstream and downstream from you, just doing one spot, it makes a little difference maybe, but really it's the whole system working together, not just one landowner doing their thing. Unless we've literally got one landowner that's got a dam somewhere downstream over here that's flooding all Aaron, that'd be the only way you'd end up with that type of thing that could really make a huge difference. And so talking about debris removal, myself and Mayor Bailey and Wayne, we went and looked at it the last time we talked about this, and we looked at several different places. You'd see like one limb here, one limb at that to help Aaron. There was very little work that I saw that could be done that our program would have thought at that time. It didn't mean that I did not certainly walk from one end to the other. I did not, but we kind of cherry picked where our worst areas where the hot spots were, or where you guys thought the hot spots were. And we went and looked at them, and there was just not a whole lot we could do. Doesn't mean that hadn't changed in the last storm, so.
Irvin, you said you think we can get 100 feet above?
I think it's 100 foot up and down, and now maybe, that one time that, again, they
It
changed.
used to be 50, that's why.
No, it's at least 100, and at one time it was 200, but they changed them over time, and,
Okay.
I want to look at that online to make sure exactly what the wording is right now, because they just updated those again in 25, so I don't remember exactly what it says right now. But the 100, that ain't perfect, but that gives you a pretty good look at it on either side of a bridge. So,
I'm concerned about water line issues and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
now, see, and it don't address a water line, as far, because a lot of them are way on up from a bridge and away from it. That's a little different, so.
It's right, it's within that 100 feet of the bridge.
Now, if you're within 100, they'll let you armor that whole thing. Now, again, I can't remember if you have to turn in and basically say, notify them, I'm gonna do X, or if you can get by without it. There are certain things that they've got that allow you to do it and without notifying them, but I don't know if that's one of them or not.
Mr. Wayne gave me a gentleman that I talked to, and he told me that it's within I was thinking it was within the 50 feet, and he said that's good. We
Okay.
could get in there and do that, so.
Okay,
And we're actually waiting on some help on that right now.
there you go.
And there's a list of general permits that you can, some of them you don't even have to apply for.
That's right.
But like that's one of them. There's another one from a landowner. If you've got a gravel mower, I think it's 50 cubic yards
So-
you can remove.
So picture 2.5 truck, dump truck loads of material, what you call it.
But you have to follow all the guidelines in that permit. Like they don't want you getting below the water level. They don't want you removing a bunch of vegetation. So it's got some strings tied to it. I was looking on here. I just kind of Googled TDEC general permits. So I think that's the best way. There's several of them that you can.
But folks, TDEC, just like Wayne gave you all that contact there, TDEC and the Corps of Engineers, they are a public service just like we are. So if you call them and ask them a question, they'll try to answer it. As long as they understand what you're talking about, they'll try to answer. And if they don't understand what you're talking about, if you ask them to come out here, they're about like us. They need to go see you at that point. You all pay our salaries, so that's what we're here for. Sometimes we don't accomplish what we want or as much as we'd like, but we're still trying.
You mentioned earlier, maybe I just didn't hear it clearly or remember, about the Army Corps of Engineers getting to do a study.
So
There's
they,
a bigger architectural plan of what we need to do in 5, 10, 20 years.
so I don't know if they'll do it on, they'll provide, when they look at it, they look at, the area of concern. The one they're working on and working with us on the Trace Creek one down there from the Waverly flood from 21. So they are doing it there. And I forget how much money that is, but I was thinking that the Corps of Engineers can do at least some level of a flood control study to evaluate the area of concern, in this case, the town area. And I don't have the folks I deal with there are regulatory, not the flood control folks. But you may know better than I do down there in Waverly, who their contact person would be.
I don't know their name right off, but I can get that information for you and get that to you.
But, so at that point, mayor's office or Houston County, depending on how big area you're gonna look at, they would talk to those folks. Normally, it requires an application to say, we request assistance for whatever they call it. And at that point, if you can do at least the initial flood study, it gives you some ideas. It gives you some broad, now it's not design specific at that point. It's more broad, talking about how concept wise, what you would talk about doing to try to help the areas. Now they also may not have any good answers, but now, like I said, I mentioned earlier, part of it may be they look at levees. Part of it could be a dam somewhere in the upper watershed. Part of it could be buyouts. So all of those types of things fit in there together. Now, I can't speak for the Corps, but normally that stuff's voluntary too. I won't say they can't. I know the Corps of Engineers, if they were building dams and things like Old Hickory Dam or Barkley or something like that, they can do eminent domain, but I don't know them doing eminent domain for this type of thing. So at that point, you've got to have landowners that are, like I said earlier, Everybody's got buy-in. It's gotta be a group effort to try to get to whatever the end result is. And sometimes that goes good and sometimes not so good. So
So do you know when they redid the floodplain maps for Waverly? Do you know anything about that?
well, I know that originally that county mayor had decided they were not going to follow through on the, using the flood maps for the zoning. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not right? And then after all that, they came back after certain size floods, Jesse decided to pursue going back and being re-entered into that national
Flood insurance.
flood insurance program, which tied you to those flood maps and zoning.
So do you know if y'all have done that? Has that been done?
We participate in
You
the,
do, okay.
So they're
the
already
city
in.
of Erin does.
Mhm.
Houston County does not, the city of Erin does.
Okay.
'Cause I know with Waverly, there were places that weren't deemed a floodplain, like the house wasn't in a floodplain, but now it is. So if you have, let's say if you have, a loan at the bank on that, now they're gonna charge you flood insurance. So a lot of those fixed income, folks, their prices just got raised because they're having to pay for flood insurance, so.
And I know it's everything up to the top of the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah.
That's where the flood insurance goes to.
Yeah.
Now, there's a 500-year floodplain that mapped to. I'm not sure what between the 100 and the 500, how that fits, but
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I know if any dwelling is, and maybe business, that type of deal too, was within the 100-year floodplain, then that's what he's saying is right about your flood insurance.
So did y'all just recently do that, or have y'all been in?
We've always been in it as long as I've worked.
It was remapped in 22.
So that's pretty recent. That ought to be pretty accurate. About as accurate as you're gonna be.
Because they don't actually do true accounts of elevation. Because I've got the town of Pittsburgh behind my property. I got a picture.
Places where you know it's wrong. I won't, 100% to nothing on that. So, it's not like they're running valley sections with surveyors out there to verify exactly what elevation is. Fly and use pulses and you get a return back. And the LiDAR that we use, and we use it for planning and different things, we don't use it for exact elevations like what you're talking about, but it gets you pretty close. I would never think I'd be off 70 foot.
But I think they're topographical, because I've called a few times, like, hey, this is quite a bit more than y'all's elevation, but it's just what it is.
Those are
So you just sit on that office in your desk on your computer, then yeah, I can
That's right.
draw a line, spread graph, but
Yeah.
I have seen places where it's off. So
I think
that's,
you can dispute that, and they can come and do a survey. You may have to pay for it, but they can come and do an elevation survey on your particular area that you're talking about.
but I would only do it if there was something like my home was sitting in it and my insurance just doubled because of it. If it was just an acre of cropland or pasture, your insurance wouldn't change that one on that. So I'd pick my battles, I guess, before I spend a bunch of money.
pretty much it.
What else can I do for you folks? This is not a one-shot deal, as the mayor and Angie already know. If you need us for something, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you got.
We'll go ahead.
No, go ahead. I've run my mouth enough.
Well, I know, I'm not gonna say where, but somewhere out in the county, a individual sprayed a weed killer on their bank and it caused it to erode, which could have caused one of our water lines to surface. So obviously, weed killer and doing things like that is not a good plan either. I would,
So you know how I know where I'm gonna end up working? Whenever I go on a farm or if I'm working with somebody like you and Phil, I go to a place, there ain't a tree in sight. That means the vegetation that was there is gone, and that means that creek is tearing it up pretty good right there. That don't mean that erosion can't happen in and around trees, it can. But the places that have no vegetation and all it is just a big old vertical bank, if you look at what fescue does, it has roots about that deep, and then my creek banks are 6, 8, 10 feet deep. Those roots that are that deep don't get down there 6, 8, 10 feet deep and stop erosion. So, places like what you're talking, and I have seen places where landowners just do it over time and because they want that nice clean look. Well, sometimes you get that nice clean look just a little too close to you at that point once it starts eroding. They would not be the first or last person that I see do that.
And see, I don't even see farmers do that. I don't think I've ever seen a place where a farmer's done that I've worked on. but I've seen some places where some utility lines cross the creek,
Notorious for
and
that.
they try to keep those trees from growing in the power line, so they'll spray those areas. And then they get, a lot of erosion issues off of that, so.
Tremendous amount of that all across the state.
Yeah.
I see that all over the place.
So keeping a stream bank too clean could adversely affect it also.
You want to
Yes,
do
sir.
it more of an early succession station. You don't want trees to be this big around, because they're top heavy. And then if a windstorm comes, it blows them and then it pulls half the bank out with it. You kind of want them kind of in a mid-story. So, used to 50, 100 years ago, people would harvest that big timber because it was valuable. Well, with all the regulations, from what people have told me is, people were scared to death to do any kind of work around the creeks because they were scared they'd get in trouble. Hey, I can't cut that tree. I might get in trouble for that. And you can absolutely cut that timber on the creek, if it gets big. So it's just going back and doing management of the creek. If you got a creek that runs through it and you got a big tree, or even got a leaning tree, go ahead and cut that thing off and get it out of there before it causes an issue or problem.
Yeah,
But spraying ain't a good practice.
on that, as far as clearing out the trees, what you just said, when you cut the trees and stuff, down Main Street, they'll grow up to the point you can't see the businesses on the other side of the creek. We took trustees from the jail down and cut that, hauled it all off and carried it off to the dump truck and stuff. Last time we was gonna do it, they told us not to cut those less than 4 foot, leave a 4 foot.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's new on me.
And it just seems like that would cause more of an issue with a root ball, sticking up the snag.
So it could catch a snag, but it's also, they're hoping that it's gonna re-sprout. And as long as that root, even if you cut off the top part of it, at that point, like what Wayne's talking about, you're taking the weight off the top part, so it's not like a big pry bar ripping a big chunk of your bank out. But at that point, if the roots are still penetrating, and we didn't kill it, if the roots are still growing in that bank, they'll help. Now, they're not foolproof, but they'll help hold and minimize the amount of erosion in that area.
So basically, you don't want shade on as much shade, they could shade out all the young vegetation. So if you get these great big old trees and they're shaded out, that's where a lot of times your erosion will start. But if you kind of keep it in a breast height or head high vegetation, that's really the best vegetation that you want around the stream.
So let me take it a step further, what Wayne's saying right there. People ask me how much vegetation. When you back off of an area, if you're grazing or clearing right up to the stream bank, ideally, when you back up, if we can get you to back away a little bit, if you can get it to where there's whatever distance you can live with off the creek, if you can get it to where it's so thick you can't walk through it, seedling just like crazy right there. Now, for a business, I know that's not their best look, but for a landowner that's got a farm, if they can keep that growed up right next to that first 25 feet next to the bank, that's a lot of roots that are going down right through there to help enrich it and not hitting it with Roundup like what Mayor Bailey was talking about. If you go in and kill it all, you start over.
But I think our biggest reason for doing it was, well, not only for the businesses, but pulling out from the cross streets on the state highway. It would grow up today, you have to pull out on the state highway to just watch strong.
Safety's a whole nother animal, like what you're talking about.
So, taking it down to 4 foot is a big help. And using manual labor with chainsaws, that's formidable.
For sure. Well, and even beyond that, if you had chainsaw folks that are wanting to do that, but let's say some of that was pretty darn big, if you needed an excavator there to pick up big trees and set them in the back of a dump truck or something like that and haul them off, you can do that. You can do that.
You just can't get the excavator in the creek.
Yeah, you don't need to have red flags. So if your tracks are sitting in the tree, that's the way one of your neighbors picks up the phone, calls TDEC, and then you're having to fool with it. And then it's kind of a headache. So
we have people all the time call our office saying, hey, so-and-so is down the creek, and I'll tell them, hey, we're not regulatory, we're not out here to write tickets or anything like that. It's not our job. You have to call TDEC or one of the environmental agencies. So, but you'd be surprised how many people, do that.
and the stream running right through the middle of Charlestown is very visible. If anybody comes up and down through there, anybody's doing anything, somebody's gonna pick up the phone and call. Garrett, they will pick up the phone.
It's happened before.
Well, sure, and it will again if you go back down there. So the permits really are as much anything, a lot of people say, I don't like to fool getting permits. Permits keep your butt out of trouble. If TDEC gets a phone call and then you've told them you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do. And if they look in your files and say, well, they're doing this, or if somebody says you're in the middle of the creek, then at that point, whatever you said you're gonna be doing, then you really need to be doing it. You don't need to be saying, I'm working over here on the side, but actually the excavator's sitting in the middle of the creek. This guy's got a permit. That don't get you out of doing something that you ain't supposed to do, so.
Then you got these things now, too.
Oh, that's the truth.
You might have one of them stuck in your face one day, and people videotaping exactly what you're doing. Might not even be bad, but.
But permits are a necessary evil. They keep us out of trouble. It keeps me out of trouble whenever we're gonna work someplace. At that point, if anybody we had a project, I was just telling these guys, I was working on Hurricane Helene stuff, and we had a landowner that fussed and said, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. We had the TDEC and Corps permits, we let them review it, and that was the end of that discussion. So we did exactly what we said we was gonna do.
TDEC and Corps have been good to work with us here in the last couple of years, especially. I've had to ask them questions here in the last few weeks, and they get back with you. And so if y'all have a question, I would call TDEC. Clayton Mahon is who I've been talking to here recently. But if y'all need contact information, I can get you contact numbers for Neil, whatever, even with the Corps too.
What else can we talk to you folks about today?
Tell us what to do first.
What we can do without
Well,
getting into trouble to clean the creeks.
If you're wanting to pursue the Corps of Engineers study, then I would, there's a name, but I don't remember what it is. I would talk, that is not a quick process. They ain't nothing, we work for the federal government. That's with the federal government. You ain't gonna snap your fingers and be done overnight. It took you a long time to get here. It won't be done and fixed overnight. So talk to those folks, have somebody come up here and sit where I'm at and answer your questions for you and talk to you about what they can and can't do. So start there. Talk about doing other things. If there are areas like what she was talking about, if there's areas that you're wanting to try to provide additional storage within within areas that the town already owns, it doesn't hurt you. It's just expensive, but it's money. It's money.
What kind of liability is it when it's not, doesn't have water in it?
Say it again.
What kind of liability, kids falling in it or whatever?
It's anything. Do you own land next to the street?
Yes.
Same
It's
liability.
property. But I'm not talking about the deep hole. I'm talking about sloping down to the creek, not going in the creek, sloping down to the creek to create a reservoir. The example that I used when I brought it up at the meeting is if I'm mixing a cake and my bowl's not big enough, it's gonna slosh out. It's gonna overflow.
That gives it a place to go.
If I have a bigger bowl, it gives it more place to go.
So that's why I was saying every little bit helps. I don't know how many places you guys would own up and down the creek, but every time you do that, if you decide, and it's also one of the things that you can do a little bit at a time. If you say, okay, we're gonna spend a week in there with an excavator and we're gonna take that material and haul off. But now you gotta realize also, it's not a magic bullet. It's gonna make a little bit of difference. Every time you do it, it makes a little bit of difference. It's not going, as much water as you all deal with the land, the way it lays around you all right here, and all of it heads right down to that creek. That's a lot of, when you get a big enough storm, that's a lot of water that goes down through there, and that ain't changing. The only way you stop that is to catch the water with dams, small dams up in the headwaters of it before it ever gets to you. And at that point, I don't even know if there's places where that would be available. I don't know if you could fit those in and around residences. I don't know if there's places on farmers' land where they would want that or not. And again, the more you keep it dry is the maximum amount of water you let it fill up. Well, farmers don't want a dry hole on their place. I wouldn't either. So that's a hard sale. Saying a dam helps, but it helps if it stays empty, and then when it rains, it fills back up and then let it go. But a farmer's looking at that going, well, that's a half acre or an acre worth of land that's not worth anything at that point. So I'm well aware of the sales job that somebody's got to make for somebody like that. And that's what you're doing. You're selling them the greater good of helping the town of Erin.
We're very fortunate to own 2 lots quite along the creek bank. Now, one has a building where the Workforce Essentials will vacate no later than the 1st of July. so we won't be disturbing anyone there.
Yeah.
The other is Bethesda Mission, who sits along the front of the road, you know. Some of that area also could be removed. I guess I need to know, just straightforward, what can we do? Can we go down into the creek banks with, when I say we, I'm talking perhaps the
You're talking about
county inmates,
Oh,
the
okay.
city, the, you know, could they go into the creek banks, remove the debris, the fallen tree branches that are clogging? up
So
the
all woody
waterways?
debris, if that's what you're, and let's say there's any, I don't, your all's stream channel is clean, fairly clean compared to some places that are just full of junk. Anything that's loose debris, let's say it's a shopping cart, let's say it's a, I don't know what else, tires and junk like that that just gets loose in the stream. And any loose, not living, not a tree that's growing up and living, but anything that's loose, all of that can be done without a permit. Now, you still have to have land rights, like what we was talking about with Angie at the start of this. If a landowner doesn't want you on your property, you're kind of held to that. Temporary construction easements normally need to be got for somebody to be able to do it. And most landowners, some landowners don't want to do that on their own. Otherwise, it would already been done. What you're talking about, you all wouldn't have to fool with. So it's a mixed bag, and some of it will be affecting certain landowners, and others, maybe they don't have a piece of property, maybe they don't have a business or a home that's sitting low. It may not bother them. The water gets across their grass and then goes back down. No big deal to them. So part of that is you all as a group selling that to everybody to let you do whatever you're wanting to do. The gravel dredging thing is a hard sell. Not for landowners. A lot of local folks will let you do that. Permitting is the hindrance there. It's hard to overcome.
Okay, I think what I've heard you say is that we right now, without having any sort of permits, let me recap this, is we cannot get into the creek. I'm talking in particular about the one coming down into Erin that causes the flooding with Dear Lovely. We cannot get in the creek with any equipment.
Meaning the tracks of the equipment or the tires of the equipment.
Okay, but we can get in there with chainsaws. We can remove the loose debris, the fallen trees, what have you. But we cannot remove anything living, such as the overgrowth of weeds.
Without getting permits and saying you're going to do so, that's correct.
Thank you.
And so even that type of work, just like what the gentleman was talking about using the labor, the inmates' labor and stuff like that. So let's say you're going to do debris removal from one end of the stream channel to the other through town. You can have a piece of equipment. If the creek is here and the bank is here, I can have a piece of equipment sit up here and turn and reach and grab something and set out. Meaning if all you're doing is getting the same woody debris, they can do that and then put that in the back of the dump truck. When I say the tracks, if this thing's sitting here with its tracks, you're okay. As soon as the tracks go down into the creek, that's your problem. That's where somebody's gonna take a picture of you and copy that, and then you gotta explain yourself. So, and most of the time, your creek is not so big that you couldn't work it from one side, and then if you have to, go around to the other side, and you can work everything in and around it. It's not like it's a 30-foot deep channel or something. Y'all might like it, it's a 30-foot deep channel. It holds more water, so. But,
Just to clarify for me, the section of creek that they're talking about is along Main Street. And I pulled the deeds on every one of those pieces of property up there, and their deed states that like say the barbershop, for example, is owned by Jimmy Clark. His deed states that he owns to the center of the creek.
very common, very
And
common.
then T-Dots picks up and goes to the center of the creek on that side. So Jimmy Clark would have to give us permission if we just work on
His half.
his half. But then T-Dot has already said they would do their half when they are ready, because they're not gonna do it.
It's hard to do. So the problem is doing half of one of anything. So if your creek is going this way and I got a tree laying this way, how do I cut that thing at the middle? I mean, I guess you can, but I'd sure hate to cut one and leave it if a tree's laying there. So the property line, folks, that's from one end of Tennessee to the other. The property lines is very, very, not everywhere, but very common that it's a center line of the creek. All over the place.
So each one of those property owners would have to give written permission to the city of Erin to go up there, and we most likely would have to pay them if they so chose for
That's up to you all to decide.
easements normally, sometimes they're.
I would have thought a temporary easement that benefits them shouldn't cost you nothing, but I
I
could
would
be
think
wrong.
that, but there's been another time that we had to pay because we got a water line on, and I put a fire hydrant on the wrong side of a
Oh,
driveway.
that's, hold up. I will say this should be occasional, debris doesn't, it's not a one time to do, one time and walk away, never touch it.
Right.
Debris keeps coming to you because
Right.
a stream ain't nothing but a conveyor belt. Everything from above you, if it hits the water, it's gonna come down to you somewhere. So, but working half of it and TDOT had working half of it when they ain't working at the same time or pretty similar times, that sounds like that's not good.
Okay, and then we would also have to give the same opportunity to every person within the city of Erin, from, city limits to city limits. The same
Well, or-
opportunity for us to do that on their property.
Or depending on how big of a bite you want to take, maybe you should do. Holy cow, that number gets out of hand real quick. So bite it off pieces that you can handle, start in there that you want to work along the downstream end. You can do all this work up here, and if I've got a plug at the downstream end, you ain't done nothing till you get that last plug. So that's why you always start at the downstream end, pulling plugs as you come up. So at the very least, as you go, when water does get to this point, it has a better chance of leaving. So once you get that one done, if you've got more money and you want to tack another round of it, then, and at that point also, PDX does not require permits for woody debris, but they are going to want you to stabilize everything and reseed and remulch everything as you get out of there. And if I own a piece of property where you just work, that's all great that you help me, but don't make a mess and then leave it to me. So.
And had seed, straw, and then whatever
I would-
physical work.
Yeah, so I mean, it needs to be smoothed out with a piece of equipment, whatever that is, and you gotta haul it someplace. You gotta do something with it. I don't know where that is. Mulch it, let the citizens come get the mulch off of it. If that's what they're gonna do, great. Others, the most efficient way dealing with wood is burning. It makes it disappear and you ain't gotta fool with it no more. And then if you do get another big storm and you have to put more woody debris right back in the same place, you at least got the space where you can do it.
In the past, when we have picked up debris from other storms, we had taken it to the landfill, and the landfill has burn house.
Okay.
And so we take it there and have it burned.
Okay, so you've got a plan for that, good. Do they charge you for that? Okay,
They do not.
very good.
I mean, I know for me, for a plain action, I mean, it seems like we're here every year. But I feel like we need to go to the river and just kind of walk it back, because whatever we do from here town up is gonna bottleneck that overhead bridge.
So
And
the
you
county
gotta clean that
mayor
out.
is behind you.
It is behind me.
The county
So-
mayor.
It doesn't get too wild and holding water, but beyond it goes into another 90-degree turn, and that's where Wells Creek comes in. That's where our problem is a lot of it, is Wells Creek joins back into Erin Bridge. So we need to start from there.
And on
work
their
back
map,
up.
it's right here. It's where
Yeah,
it's
she's
right
like,
here. It's right here.
So whether, you all do need to look at your problems and see where, I'll say this about the town of Waverly.
but if we go into a property that's got a 90-degree turn and more water we shove is gonna be road and pull it, I mean, that's where we need y'all's help to kind of help us,
Potentially,
give us some insight on what to do, or how to reseed it back, or how to reroute it.
we can help with that. Funding wise, you would go, if it's whoever the landowner is, they could maybe, depending on what kind of land, if it's ag land, that type of thing, they could pursue funding through our programs. If it's not that, then if nothing else, like what we're doing here today is called technical assistance. We're providing information for you all to decide to try to answer questions, whatever it may be. If it's for proposing what can be done to accomplish a certain goal, we have programs that are funded that comes ahead of that, unfortunately, because we get funding every year. It doesn't mean we don't do those things, but oftentimes the technical assistance falls a little lower on the totem pole because we've got timelines for funding that has got to be spent. So we prioritize things, but we still are able to try to make time for you to answer those types of questions. I will also say this, while we do site-specific designs for everything, those projects that the mayor mentioned, you all got copies of our engineering drawings for every single one of those. Now, would that fit everywhere? I don't know. It'd be pretty close. Just something to think about. So if you're in a mood of saying, let's do it and let's do this, and at that point, you know you want to do a certain amount of funding, how much do you want to bite off? Those can be done.
I got one other question.
Sir?
If it's all blocked up here on the lower end of town, dams up, it's holding it all back. And you live down here on the lower end of town, what's gonna happen to you down here when this all breaks out and go down there?
Just what I talked about your neighbor behind you. When you pull a plug, water's going somewhere. Who's down below?
So if we clean it out up here a little bit, it still have to be some down there.
Make it worse on us. 'cause you're-
It'll, if you,
Damaging it.
Oh, well.
so it depends, but, if you pull a plug, if you've got problems here in town, and let's say there's a dam of wood or it could even be a bridge, it's water's leaving there and going someplace else quicker. So whoever lives down here, it's gonna be running through there. Now, if that's just on grass versus, now don't get me wrong, there can be damage to pastures. Certainly, if a row crop field is tilled up, you certainly can get damage to those for sure if it gets big flood waters across it. And I don't want to belittle that because we deal with those kind of damages all the time, but I would rather see water. What do we think made all those things flat? Water running across it over centuries and centuries and centuries. That's what made prime farmland flat. Water running out there, it leveled it for us. So water has run in those kind of places for forever, since the beginning of time. It's going to keep running over them till the end of time. So whenever that is. But what you said is right. I saw a place up in East Tennessee where they had a box culvert on a great big TDOT bridge. They redid the bridge and opened that up, and then the farmers down below it ended up having a lot more flooding and a lot more damage after they did that. So what you're saying is right, both you guys.
Well, what my scenario was, if the creek, the steady flow of water going through this creek and continues to take it out, if it stops up here and starts holding it back for a pretty good while, and all at once it comes over and washes that out, the more devastating downstream then is if it just.
That's what I was gonna say. That's similar to, if y'all kept up with the Waverly flood where the railroad bust. So if you have a dam bust or a levee bust or anything like that, if it was holding water full to the rim and then all of a sudden something caused it to just go poof and be gone, all that force with water to this elevation and now it's going out here, the force in that hydraulic grade line is an enormous amount of force, and it's going to tear up everything in sight until it finally kind of levels on out once it gets way on down. Yeah, that's worst case right there. Worst case for everybody.
Well, I know in 2010, I sat and watched. It was about midnight. 2010, played May 1st, I'm not sure. But anyway, when it broke over at the Tank Hill Bridge, because it was flowing, it's coming up, when it broke over, I believe in about 2 minutes, it filled the whole parking lot for the Baptist church, breaks. I could literally see the water rising on my block building. And I will tell you, I went over to Mitchell's Hardware and I stole pot and soul bags when I thought it was going to break over to put in front of my doors. And it was just funny because it reached that certain point. It got about that far from the bottom of my door. When it reached that point, it broke back over somewhere and was all going that way. Of course, all of that flooding, I think that was, as a result of that, is the first FEMA project for here was when they acquired some of this property. Of course, this one was a holdout and didn't want to, but there was several. The co-op used to be located back here. And I think that has helped getting that property because it does give it a place for the water to go.
You're not fighting it in those areas.
But it just amazed me how quickly that whole area filled up, and it was enough water. I'm not talking inches, I'm talking about enough. It was floating. Mr. Brake is a recycler. It was floating refrigerators, and it floated them down through there. And that, I mean, it just blew my mind how quick. I guess that type of that low spot was a type of a reservoir, but it filled it up very quickly.
So we haven't touched on this at all, but it's worth just at least hearing about it. So I know you all know this area. So think about where 13 hits down there at the corner where the Mexican restaurant is, and where the road comes back this way towards us here. All across Wells Creek right there, what is that road? Now you've got the bridge that'll pass a certain amount of water. The rest of that is a dam. Every road, people don't think about it this way. Every road that's elevated above the floodplain is nothing but a dam with an opening through it, whether it's a culvert like what you were talking about, or whether it's a great big spanning bridge. All that distance that we've necked down, that TDOT necked down at the floodplain, however much distance that is, if none of that was there and all of that was elevated out through there and the whole water could through there, then all that water would stack up on the upstream side back in behind where they go up and where the Mexican restaurant and all that is. So every bridge you've got, depending on how big of water you're talking about, on small floods, you don't even know the difference. You don't see it back up in there. On big floods, that would be like a reservoir right there, just like Take Hill Road, smaller version of that than what Wells Creek is, but it's the same exact thing.
We witnessed that with a boat once against it.
There you go. There you go.
You know, it's probably easy from concrete gravel where you run off.
Every time you're doing that and increasing runoff, every time we have another Walmart, every time you have a big business that's got a big roof shedding water off of it, and we've got to have those places. But every time you do that, that water runs off faster. None of that goes in the ground no more. So it's going off and gets out of here, and all that goes into Town Creek and the Aaron Branch here, or it goes into Wells Creek, or eventually goes on down into the Cumberland River.
A lot of these big townships and cities now, in order to build a subdivision or any kind of construction, you gotta put in these
Stormwater.
dry ponds.
Well, so right out here, right as we came up across the bridge, if you look right over here on the left, I don't know, coming this way, I don't remember what that's gonna be, what y'all said it was, but there's a little stormwater detention pond right there beside of it where they're tearing up that ground. They're having to do that to store water. That's more of a construction stormwater permit, but in reality, it's the same principle. What we're talking about doing, it just depends on the scale of what you're talking about doing in the watershed above that.
But sometimes people aren't happy with that because that infringes on people's rights.
Sure.
to do. So I just
Nobody wants to be told what they can do with their own property or what they have.
you get to this point where we've got flooding and other issues.
In my opinion, and this is all this is, guys, working in and your own town, the more you all can do to elevate things or buy things out that are right next to the stream, just like what y'all talking about FEMA, and get those folks that own those properties to move businesses or homes to areas that are just a little bit higher in elevation, does you a lot of good. Because at that point, once that building's gone and it's just grass, nobody worries about it. I mean, it still may cause a little bit of damage. It may put gravel over on it, or it may put woody debris and other junk out there on it when it floods, but it gives water a place to go. And just like what I was talking about on the floodplains out here on your agricultural land, that flat ground that's next to Aaron Branch, that's because water's running there since the beginning of time. This ain't new. It may be new to what we don't want it to tear up, but it's been going there for forever.
Well, I guess it's, but you do a lot with stream bank stabilization on farms and stuff, so the reason people like the creek bottom and river bottom is because it does flood sometimes. It brings silt and nutrients to the soil, so they like that.
Best soils we got.
And so in essence, what we've done is we've located here on a creek bottom.
Y'all are in the heart of it.
So it's, no matter what you do, it's going to be difficult.
If you follow like what's happening in Waverly, that flood occurred on a Saturday, and many people, especially had young kids that went to the elementary and middle school. Can you imagine being a parent and that flood, happening on a Friday, right when those kids were, coming into school, and you've got water that's, up to the ceiling? That would be the most devastating, event that's ever happened. I mean, it's devastating as it was anyway, but, you can see what Waverly's done now. They said, no, we're not building an elementary and middle school here anymore. We're moving it to higher ground. And they're moving it to one of the highest points in the county. So I know it's hard to do with businesses and homes.
And expensive.
Very expensive, but, it's difficult situation.
Folks, we're here for you today. We are public servants. We're here to help any way we can. Share knowledge from where I've seen stuff from all across the state to tell you what I've seen, what works, what doesn't work. I've worked in your town. There is no magic bullet. There is no way snapping the fingers and saying we're going to clean out the creek and that fixes everything. With bedrock in your creek channel, that ain't going to happen unless you're going to try to drill and shoot. That sounds awful. But if you come up with different ideas, I will be glad to try to talk to you about them. Getting people out of the floodplain with critical infrastructure, homes and businesses, you're always gonna have roads in and around the floodplain, that's life. But, any home that sits in the floodplain, well, what Waverly's doing is they're setting, the ones that are going through the insurance are setting, they're putting additional blocked roads and raising up those floors until they're above the 100-year floodplain to try to help. It doesn't mean water won't run around them, but it won't get up to that, unless you get a bigger than 100-year event, it won't be getting up to that floor. So that helps you with the insurance side of things. It does not mean that's gonna be as big a flood as you're gonna get, because goodness grows, or May, it's coming up May 1st. Best I know that's above 1,000-year event that we had then. So the 100-year floodplain, water's still gonna get up above that elevation at that point. That's just the magic elevation for flood insurance.
Well, there's a house on Main Street that they took and jacked it up a few years ago, and,
How'd
it's
that work?
amazing. Well, I mean, they did, it was.
But has the water got in it since?
I don't know. They got it up enough, there's no way, but I mean, they say that's where it needed to be. But
Yeah, I don't
they-
ever say no way anymore after seeing the floods that you guys have had in May of 2010, or the one in Waverly, or the Hurricane Helene that I've been working on for the last year and a half now. I don't never say never no more. I never know how big water. People say water will never get there. I didn't think after seeing May 2010 that water would get higher than that. Seen places where water got a lot higher than May 2010 in certain areas. What else, folks?
So basically, we need to encourage some of the landowners to kind of maybe take care of their own little area and clean it out. And we can't, I don't believe the city can mandate them to do that. We can ask them to do
I
that.
would be surprised if you mandate anything like that.
And I don't think we can. But if we encourage them to clean and trim and do,
And keep it,
keep it trimmed.
yeah, that's right.
Because, you know, the city of Erin doesn't have enough money to just do that whole stretch
That's
of
expensive.
everybody's lands up there. There's many, many parcels up through there.
Areas that where landowners don't want that, and you see what kind of headache that's gonna create for you, maybe it's a place you can cherry pick the areas of additional assistance. Now, I realize at that point, everybody can say, well, we all want the same thing, but
Right, and I feel like we have places in Bottleneck also, like right behind the bed. We have the railroad bed, and then you have a bluff here.
you're hemmed
And
in.
so you're hemmed in this little area. And then when you get down to about just before Tank Hill, then you can start.
Anytime you're like this, you're kind of bluffed in,
Mhm.
that's where bad things happen. So the water can't go nowhere, it's going down, and then all it can do is just keep stacking deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's gonna tear something up eventually.
When it gets past, it's right at Rocky Hollow when it comes over, and then we're buying those properties right there, those first two properties. So that's gonna help some. And then you kind of come up a little bit for a bridge, and there's another block building. But then it kind of goes behind it. And at some point, that has washed out a massive hole of water for kids to swim in. I mean, they love it, you know, you can dive off the
That's
bridge.
great when the water's low.
But, you know, you can see damage is out
Yeah.
there. And then we're buying a property on the backside of the creek, and that's gonna help off of there on that side.
So like what you were talking about, every little bit helps. So to me, every bit of that, is it the magic bullet that fixes everything? No, but every little bit's helping there. Your all's damages didn't occur overnight. The fix won't occur overnight. So you all as a group working towards it, maybe you follow up with Corps of Engineers, see what they say. See if they'll help. Our agency's still able to help on some things, but most of that is not flood control. Most of that is erosion control where, like what I was talking about, where a creek eats inside of it next to a road or a pipe or something like that.
When you finish here, we'll talk about that in 2 days.
Okay. Anything else, folks?
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. If you need something else another time, they know how to get a hold of Wayne, and I can be here.
Dr. Martin, I'll get you that contact with the Corps of Engineers. I'll get that contact for you, Corps of Engineers.
Make sure that these folks get that too, because that's the ones that I think if they're gonna do it, it'll have to be
That would be a good.
with your signature.
Well, thank everybody for coming. I appreciate your input. I appreciate y'all being here. And hopefully it's been provided some information that will be helpful.
Thank y'all for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
One of them is that place that's out there off of 13, and where it's swinging way over close to the bank. And it's, I keep saying, thinking there's two out there, but she said there's a water line through there. We looked at it before, and it was not close enough. Now, I don't have